Henry VIII is possibly the world's most famous king to have ever ruled in history. He's known today for his incredibly turbulent love life, which saw him marry 6 different women. 2 of these wives had an incredibly brutal downfall, meeting their end at the sharp blade of an axe or a sword. One of the saddest stories about Henry VIII's wives is the fate and story of Catherine Howard, his 5th wife. She was just merely a teenager when she was executed for treason against Henry, after being accused and found guilty of committing adultery with Thomas Culpepper, a man close to the infamous king. So join us today as we look at the troubled execution of Catherine Howard, Henry VIII's 5th wife, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Catherine Howard was born in 1523 in London to a high-profile family. Her aunt Elizabeth Howard was the mother of Anne Boleyn, who was Henry VIII's 2nd wife, a lady who also suffered the same fate as Catherine. This made Anne and Catherine first cousins, and in fact Catherine Howard was even the first cousin once removed of the future Queen Elizabeth I. She was from noble status and a large family. It was said that Catherine was her mother's 10th child, and the family had to rely on other wealthier family members for financial support and help. Catherine's mother died in 1528, and her father married again, later becoming the controller of Calais. After the death of her mother, Catherine was sent to live with her father's stepmother, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, Agnes Howard. She presided over a large household in many different stately homes, and there were many other people she associated with, and she possessed many different servants and staff. Within the Dowager Duchess's household, there was a severe lack of discipline. The children raised there were educated and trained in the morals and duties of the aristocracy. However, the standard of education given was rather poor, as was the supervision. Catherine Howard was influenced here by older girls, who allowed men into the bedchambers in the evening, and the girls were given wine, food and gifts, often stolen from the kitchens. Catherine was led astray by these girls, and it was said she shunned education and instead preferred her dance lessons. Her character was described as vivacious, and she could be interpreted as being immature. At some point inside the Dowager Duchess's household, Catherine began music lessons with a teacher named Henry Mannix. It's been established that he was much older, in possibly his mid-30s when he taught Catherine, but at some point they began a relationship which was described as inappropriate. It's alleged that Mannix preyed and groomed Catherine, and at some point they engaged in a physical relationship. This would later come back to haunt Catherine, despite the blame laying at Mannix's feet, with him abusing what at the time was a young teenager. She ended contact with him in around 1538, and then shortly after she was courted by Francis Derham. Derham worked as a secretary for the Dowager Duchess, and the two became very close, becoming lovers, and they would refer to each other as husband and wife. Derham greatly trusted Catherine, but their relationship was rather short-lived, as the Duchess found out and forced them to break it off. The Duke of Norfolk Thomas Howard, Catherine's uncle, was a man who was always keen to elevate his standing within court, and to help him do this he brought the teenage Catherine to court into the household of Henry VIII's 4th wife, Anne of Cleves. She served as a lady-in-waiting, and due to her youthfulness and good looks, she caught the king's attention. At the time the king had switched off from Anne of Cleves and was not interested in her, and at the time Cromwell had also suffered a fall from grace with his failed 4th marriage proposal for the king. Because of this, Thomas Howard saw a path to power, placing Catherine in the king's affections, and the already powerful Howards would hopefully rise even further. The king, who was known for his wandering eye, did exactly as was expected, becoming intensely interested in Catherine. Henry claimed that he had never known a woman like her, and he gave her extremely lavish and expensive gifts, showering her in the best items the crown could bestow. Henry also gave her estates and land, and he referred to her as a jewel of womanhood. They were quickly married by Bishop Bonner of London on the 28th of July 1540, and Catherine was around 17, and Henry was at the time 49, grotesquely overweight and miserable. Catherine was too young to take part in the duties that a queen would undertake, and she lived like a queen, dressing in the finest fashion from France and the best jewels. She left London shortly after the marriage, as the plague had hit the city, and the king and now queen went on honeymoon to Reading and Buckingham. The king on this trip was known to have been in a foul mood, and as winter 1540 came, his moods and depression grew deeper. Henry, who was in great pain with his leg ulcers, became rather short with his advisers, and he began to regret many of his decisions, including the execution of Thomas Cromwell. With this, Catherine Howard's downfall would also come. In the spring of 1541, Catherine was allegedly involved in secret meetings with Thomas Culpepper, a young man who was a favourite courtier of King Henry. He was a man who succeeded allegedly in capturing the Queen's affections, and whilst on progress, they would meet up in secret, with the meetings being manufactured by the Queen's ladies-in-waiting. Rumours quickly spread around the court, and with this investigations about Catherine's conduct occurred. Archbishop Thomas Cranmer conducted the investigations to knock out his rivals at court, and during the interrogations, a love letter was found written from Catherine to Thomas Culpepper. The evidence had been found, and Catherine Howard was clearly guilty. On the 1st of November 1541, whilst the king was praying, he received a letter outlining the allegations. Henry had been disgraced by Catherine and his favourite courtier, and they both had to pay. Catherine was stripped of her queenship, and she was taken to Sion Abbey and held there. She was forced to give back Anne of Cleves' ring and other jewellery that the king gave her. Interestingly, her marriage to Henry was never annulled. Culpepper and Francis Derham, who had also been implicated in affairs with Catherine due to his previous conduct, were tried at the Guildhall and were sentenced to death for high treason. They had been found guilty of adultery with the Queen, and on the 10th of December 1541, Derham was hanged, drawn and quartered, with Culpepper being beheaded. Allegedly, their heads were then placed on spikes on London Bridge, and as Catherine Howard headed to the Tower of London, she saw the heads of her former lovers. Catherine Howard entered the tower through Traitor's Gate, and her execution was arranged for Monday the 13th of February 1542 at 7 a.m. She was sentenced to death by a bill of attainder, which regarded the fact that she failed to disclose her sexual history as treason, and also her liaisons with Culpepper secured her death sentence. She was never tried, and was looked after by the constable of the tower while she was imprisoned. The night before her execution, Catherine spent hours praying and also practising morosely placing her head onto the block, which would have been used in her execution. On the 13th of February 1542, she woke early and then made her way out of the apartment at the tower to the scaffold which had been created. As she approached, she looked terrified and pale, and she needed help to climb the scaffold. Once on the scaffold, she made a short but quiet speech in which she said her punishment was a fair one, and she asked the many counsellors who attended to pray for her soul. A common rumour is also stated that she allegedly said, "I die a queen, but I would rather have died the wife of Culpepper." On the scaffold she was so weak that she could hardly speak, being overcome by the fear. The executioner approached her and gave her a blindfold, and Catherine placed a piece of cloth around her eyes. Then, as she practised so many times the night before, in front of the sizable crowd, she placed her head onto the block. At this point the executioner raised his incredibly sharp axe as the crowd gasped. He then struck Catherine Howard, and the former queen's head was taken off with one swift blow from the axe. It only took one slice for Catherine Howard to be killed. The executioner then picked up Catherine's head from the floor, grabbing it by the hair, and he took off her blindfold and displayed her lifeless face to the crowd. He then proclaimed, "God save the king," but the executioner's day was not done, with Lady Rochford's execution, Catherine Howard's lady-in-waiting, coming straight after. As the axe fell, Catherine Howard, the fifth queen and wife of Henry VIII, was around 18 years old when she was killed. The teenage girl, who rose so quickly and sharply within the court of history's most infamous king, fell even quicker. However, her liaisons and meetings with other men, such as Thomas Culpepper, signed her death warrant. To cheat on the king was an incredibly dangerous thing to have done, and Catherine Howard's death today is viewed as a sad one, and as an execution which is rather troubled. She may have been a victim of the manipulations of others who wanted to gain favour from Henry VIII. Today she is remembered as Henry's ill-fated fifth wife, and she is considered a young girl who was easily led astray. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.